I really hate this time of year. I mean, sure, it's Christmas and all, but it gets so dark so early. It's only 3 in the afternoon, and I have to turn the light on in the room. Well, one of the lights on anyway. But today, of course, as you can tell from the title of the video, we are going to introduce the next in the latest of the long line of wholesome computer videos for all of you. That's right, I'm going to show you my Wang. Oh, that's too good to just resist. Anyway, so this is a Wang. It is the only Wang that I own, so I guess technically it is my Wang. You can see there, actually that's kind of difficult to see. Wang EXEC 386 20 MHz SX. It's actually an EXEC 3131. And they're nice, and they put the specifications right on the front. I guess nobody thought to take this sticker off. It's an IBM compatible with a 20 MHz 386 SX, assuming it hasn't been upgraded. 2 megs of RAM, again, assuming it hasn't been upgraded. 124 megabyte hard drive, 120, and even less than that when it's formatted. It does have both diskette drives, 5 1/4 and 3 1/2, and I believe that we are looking at a 1.44 meg and a 1.2 meg high-density drive for both. Send-receive fax modem, which was a big deal in the day, back in the day. 16-bit VGA with 512K of video memory, which again was also a pretty big deal back in the day. A mouse, which was also a pretty big deal back in the day. All of these things that you didn't used to have, that we take for granted these days. 6 expansion slots, parallel mouse and 2 serial ports. I love how they mentioned the mouse twice. Novell Network certified. Ooh. Monitor sold separately. Complete software solution. DOS 5 and Windows 3 with the productivity and entertainment packs, including the VHS setup tape. It's really unfortunate I didn't get that along with this. The other unfortunate thing, that's probably more unfortunate, I'm sure you can see it. This front panel looks kind of weird, doesn't it? That's because it's broken. And what's more, is that's not the only thing that's broken. The power switch is broken. And you might be able to see that this is kind of a little bent up. And there's a ding in the back corner. This was shipped, and I wouldn't say that it was packaged very poorly, but it wasn't packaged that well either. So it was damaged in shipping, and I did get a refund for this, but as you can see, all of the tabs, and all of them, are broken off, some worse than others. I mean, this is still intact, I guess, but I wouldn't call that a tab. And that's bent, so that's lovely. But everything else is broken. So, I'm not even really sure how this case is supposed to go into place, because it looks like it should screw in on the side, but there's nothing for it to screw into. So I'm not real sure about that one. Let me go ahead and we'll flip it around here and have a look at the back. If we have a look at the back, you can see things are in even more dire straits back here. This really does not look good at all. You can see they say you get 6 expansion slots here, but really you only get 5 because one of them is taken up by the modem. And I'm assuming that is the original modem. But there are your 2 serial ports. There is your mouse port, which looks like it's PS2. Initially I had thought that it wasn't. I thought that it didn't have the little square at the top, the little black square, for the positioning of the pinout of the PS2 connection, but no, it looks like that's PS2. There's your parallel and your VGA, and that's your keyboard. It's not an AT bus keyboard port. I think it looks more like a Tandy keyboard port to me, and I don't think that an AT bus keyboard will work in that. I mean, we can try it, but I'm not going to trash a keyboard for the pure sake of seeing if this thing will work with an AT bus keyboard. You can see, I guess there were options for 2 more serial ports, because there's breakouts right here. You can see all of this corrosion damage here. That was caused by something that is a problem, at least I think that it was caused by something that's a common problem across machines of this vintage, although I'm not really sure how this much damage happened, because you can see the battery itself, the box looks like it's in fairly decent condition. There's not acid all over it. I mean, there's a little bit of schmutz here, but it doesn't look like this thing's been violated in any way. What I suspect happened, and this happens in a lot of cases, is it actually went out through the wires, which are no longer present because they broke off when I pulled this thing out. Because the cable had corrosion all over the end of it. I really don't know how that happens, how it leaches out through the wire. Very strange, strange thing. You can see there's also some rust damage up there. Some of this is no doubt because it was probably stored in a damp location. It looks like I figured out how to get the case off. There's a screw there and a screw here. I don't think there are any others. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll have an inspection in this thing and just make sure that nothing obvious has gone wrong. But I don't know if this works, because this does not fill me with confidence. I've never powered this on. I've had it for months now, and I have waited until now. So I guess this will be my early Christmas present if this actually works. I don't know. But you can see here, there's the Wang address. See, it's an EXEC 3131, designed in the USA but made in Taiwan. Here's your power supply ratings. FCC ID. There's a date, which is clearly not a date. That's also not a date. There's your Wang part number and a serial number. I'm not sure when this would have been made, but my guess is sometime in the early 90s. Just based on the fact that it's a 20 megahertz 386. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll pull the cover off, and we'll have a little bit of an inspection on this before we try and power it up and just see what happens. Okay, I pulled the cover off, and I did make one modification already. This screw was not present, so this was just allowed to float around in the machine. So I'm sure that if there's really going to be anything wrong with this, it'll be the hard drive. What hard drive is this? Seagate ST114A. So there's a CHS. Yeah, I think that is the original drive. 120 megabytes. 124 megabytes is what it lists, but it's a 120. Here actually is a map of the motherboard, so that's pretty neat. You can see some things on this. So the 2 serial ports are right there. And for whatever reason, it looks like only one of them is plugged in. Yeah, so let's fix that. I'm guessing that the reason why it wasn't plugged in is because this modem is there, and maybe that takes over the COM1. I'm not really sure. But there's the dip switch bank. There's what all the dip switches are supposed to correspond to. So you can actually disable the onboard IDE if you really wanted to. Onboard IDE, you could disable the onboard VGA, so you could do a lot of things with this. That was a big deal back in the day. A lot of systems actually don't have that because they were designed in such a way that the manufacturer assumed that you would never have a need to replace any of those things. So later on down the road, when these systems get older and these components fail, then you start having problems. But it looks like this one, you'd be able to do that. And also it facilitates upgrades, because you can disable the IDE controller and add your own. If you wanted to upgrade this, say, I'm not really sure what level of IDE this supports, but if you wanted to add an ATA 133 controller, you could do that, assuming one exists for ISA. I don't know if one does. I've never really investigated any add-on IDE controllers into machines, because I've never needed one. But in any event, or you could add a new video card and disable the onboard. The reason why is so that you don't have conflicts with hardware, resources, addresses, things like that, IRQs, all that kind of stuff. Security feature, I believe that's actually this key lock. Right there. I don't have the keys for this system, but in any event, there's our RAM. And the interesting thing is it looks like there are 6 72-pin SIMM slots, 4 of which are populated, and then there are 2 30-pin SIMM slots. So I'm wondering if maybe this thing had 30-pin SIMMs originally, and it's been upgraded. Because I'm not sure how you would get just, what did that say, 2 megs? I think it was 2 megabytes. Yeah, 2 megabytes of RAM. I'm sure that's more than 2 megabytes of RAM. Just because those 2 at the back, these ones right here, these look like they're pretty heavily populated. So, if anything's been upgraded in this, it's probably the RAM. We can see here that there's quite a bit of rust damage over there, but miraculously enough, it looks like there's no damage to the motherboard. Other than maybe some corrosion on some of that stuff. So it's possible that this thing survived nonetheless. So what I'm actually really looking for is I want to see the video chipset. Who manufactured it? I think it might be a Chips and Technologies video chipset, just because I see a lot of Chips and Technologies chips in here. If you'll forgive the pun. What is that? That's an NEC chip. Yeah, 20 megahertz. Is that actually the 386? A Chips and Technologies 386. 82C836. No, that's not a 386. I thought it said 386. I read it wrong. So, where would the CPU be on this? CPU is there, so it's covered up by all this stuff. So, unfortunately, I guess we can't see it. Security SRAM. Okay, maybe it's got more than just the key lock. I mean, it would make sense. This is a business machine. But, yeah, no, that's the ROM BIOS right there. And then that, I guess that also contains the VGA BIOS, because you can see it's got a VGA and a system copyright on it. So that's got both. So that's a pretty large ROM chip right there. And then that is your keyboard controller. I can't actually see what it is, but I'd imagine it's just a standard 8042. I don't really see anything else. The battery, if it had one of those barrels, would go right there. Fortunately, it does not have one of those, because that would almost certainly ruin the motherboard. But it was using that little external connector, which is on that. I think the security is disabled on this system. But in any event, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply power to this, plug in the VGA, apply power, see what it does, if anything, and then I may try a keyboard on this. I don't have a whole lot of AT keyboards, and I'd really rather not trash an AT keyboard. Maybe I'll see if that'll work with a PS2 keyboard. I kind of doubt it. I think that's probably only the mouse logic. But that's what this video is about, experimentation. Okay, it's plugged in. And I didn't get any zaps off the case, so there's no shorts to chassis ground or anything like that. What power supply is this? I'm not positive on that icon off the top of my head. I was going to say Delta at first, but that's not Delta. And it's also not Aztec Custom Power. So let's see. What is this? Does it really say on it? Oh, ACBEL. API 8069B. That looks like an ACBEL model number. Or something OEM'd by ACBEL. But I don't see H913501. 1991. So I was right with the early 90s date. But I don't see a wattage rating on that anywhere. I'd guess probably no more than maybe 150 or 200 watts. But let's see what it does. Let's power it on for the first time. That didn't last very long. That didn't last very long at all. I think there's a short somewhere. Okay, so I have made some determinations here. The problem appears to be on the motherboard. because I've disconnected the motherboard connections, I've disconnected everything else, but motherboard connections and the power supply is on. I'm not sure if you can hear it over the tape motor on this thing, but it is running. Now it's not running. And I also determined that if I plug in PS2 here, which is the second connection of the AT power supply, it will also power on and stay on. But if I plug in this, that's when it stops working. And I know that this means nothing because this is an AT power supply, not an ATX power supply, but I think the color code corresponds with the blacks or grounds, that's obvious. I don't know what the orange wire is off the top of my head, but red is usually +5, yellow is +12, and I think the blue is -5. It's either -5 or -12. I can never get it right between the white and the blue. I'm pretty sure that I think the blue is -12 because I don't think the blue is present on a lot of ATX power supplies. So, anyway, I wouldn't be surprised to find that if I pull this motherboard out, and I might just do that, but if I pull this motherboard out, there's corrosion probably all over the underside of it. And I'm sure that probably has something to do with why it doesn't work. But I think I'm going to disassemble this thing and pull the board, see if I can clean it, and maybe try it again. But that's a lot of disassembly I'm going to have to do here. Okay, I've got it out. Unfortunately, I don't think it's good news. You can see there is damage around this, but I think the bigger piece of bad news is the fact it looks like there is some definite trace damage that's been done to this. You can see there are definitely pockets of corrosion on this, and I'm not sure what it would be shorting, because that's a very interesting reaction. Normally what usually happens is it just doesn't do anything at all. But yeah, I don't think that is really going to work probably ever again. What I might end up doing is I might try taking these two screws out and maybe taking this plate off, and we'll see what that does. The other thing that I've noticed that's interesting is I don't know what all of this apparent damage is all about. Not sure what would have caused that. That's interesting. But really at this point it's probably more like putting lipstick on a pig, because I don't think this thing is going to survive. I may take the case outside and clean the case out a little bit, just to make sure that there wasn't something underneath it that was shorting. But I mean, I don't see anything obvious coming off of the power supply that would be shorting. None of the traces here. So I'm not sure what exactly is wrong. I might just start tracing it with a multimeter, tracing the pins off of the power supply connection, because it is tripping out the crowbar protection circuit in the power supply. So, but we'll see. I'll come back and I guess we'll make a diagnosis. Okay, well, I pulled the board out, I cleaned the case, and it powered up with PS1 intact this time. Let's see if it works. Nope. Tripped out on crowbar again. So I think there are bigger problems. Okay, well, I've got it to a point now where it's staying on, but the computer itself is not really doing anything. There's no output, and it didn't really do anything else. It's just kind of sitting here. So, it could be that the power supply is bad. That's a possibility, because, I mean, it looks like it's been through the Vietnam War. But, I don't know. Usually it wouldn't trip out like that if there's a motherboard issue, which there could still be, considering it's not doing anything. But I'm not really sure. Every once in a while it'll still shut off. But I think that the first step that I'm going to do any diagnosis is to replace that power supply. Or take the power supply and put it into another system and just see if it works. That's another possibility, and something I probably ought to do. But I think I'm going to save that for another video. So we'll conclude this one with that. Thank you for watching. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them down below. And this is CP666 signing off. Hope to see you next time. Till then.